Welcome to Steel Spotlight TV and Radio, William Steele True Crime. This is William Steele with my guest host. We're going to be up every Thursday and maybe more shows, but every Thursday you can count on this from here on out. We're going to be talking about all things law enforcement, true crime, examining the minds of criminals, and prevention. We're putting out shows to help people to identify these things from my point of view, my experience as a former stupid guy who was committing crimes, and Ignacio, who was on the other side of the fence doing all the right things, trying to catch the bad guys, especially the violent bad guys.
Yes.
He was going after the violent crimes, the gun crimes. He's retired from ATF, written over 70 books. Today's show, we're going to discuss the history of Miami organized crime. With that, he's put another book out. Does that surprise anyone? So, Ignacio, tell us about your book and about the history of Miami organized crime.
Yeah, bro. Appreciate it. I mean, I enjoy doing these shows, man. They're fun. The book's called The History of the Mafia in Miami. And since I grew up in South Florida, and you spent a lot of time also in South Florida, I grew up in Miami. I knew a lot of tidbits about it, but I wanted to do a little deeper dive. So I want to know, what kind of ties did Al Capone have? What kind of ties did the outfit have? And other crime syndicates in South Florida. They had a lot there. A lot of people don't realize that Al Capone bought himself back in the 20s an amazing, really 14-room mansion out there in Palm Island in Miami Beach. Gorgeous. I mean, you can look at the pictures now. It's been renovated a few times, and he bought it at the time. Believe it or not, one of the owners before him was a family member of Anheuser-Busch. Only fitting because he was a king of bootlegging, right? And prohibition. So family member Anheuser-Busch, he buys this from one of the family members, and at the time it was like $40,000, but he puts in another $100,000 at the time, which is over easily over $1 million, $1.5 million, $2 million in right. Renovations. And they say he built the largest pool, a residential pool in the United States at the time. It's enormous. If you look at the picture, it's right on the water. And it's a man-made island. If you don't know, in South Florida, Palm Island is a man-made island in the Miami Beach area. Really high-end homes. Amazing stuff there.
Yeah, we were there. We were there last year. We were down after I got out of prison. We went down there to do some filming and catching. Mm-hmm. And we passed by Palm Island and Star Island.
Oh my! I think Star Island has all the celebrities, right?
You said the address to me earlier. Did you say it again just now?
Yeah, 93 Palm Island.
93 Palm Island. Look it up.
Look it up. You can look at the pictures. Phenomenal pictures there. And he lived like a fat cat there, but. He was getting pushed out by the outfit, not by the outfit, by the Chicago authorities, law enforcement, and he had to find a different home. And he tried from the West Coast all the way to the East Coast, and he ends up going to South Florida, and he likes it there, and he buys up property, and he uses someone else to buy it, but he's involved in a lot of different things. He's still up to no good, right? He's still trying to get involved in different rackets and schemes and either bootlegging or gambling or whatever else he can, but the authorities, they know his reputation, right? And they know his problems. And they try to always push him out and get rid of him because nobody wants to have Al Capone in their community, right? I mean, they like some parts of it, but they don't like the reputation, what he brings, and the elements, and sometimes the violence that comes with it. And Al Capone is really good at plotting and planning things. And I found out he ended up plotting the Valentine's Day Massacre on February 14th, 1929, and had a tight alibi so authorities wouldn't put him in. You probably heard about this, right, Bill? He ended up having a meeting with prosecutors in Miami, right, and from in New York during the massacre. And those who don't know what it is, the San Valentine Massacre is where he had rivals killed, Bugs Moran rivals killed. Moran actually was late to the meeting and missed being killed. And while these guys were acting like police officers, dressed up, and they had 45 caliber Tommy guns, right, and lit them up. And then those who didn't die at close range shot him in the face and shot with their shotguns. So if you want to see those pictures, that's all out there too, of the massacre.
Yeah, I saw those pictures. Those are really gruesome. They posed as police. So everybody just lined up against the wall and gave it up and was shot from behind, just gunned down.
It's what made him public enemy number one. It's pretty much forced the country to say, hey, Herbert Hoover was approached by different people that said, hey, we need a special task force outside Chicago to take care of these guys. And that was the start of the Untouchables. And that's pretty much the beginning of the end for Al Capone. Because from then on, he gets convicted of tax evasion. He gets brought in, and he ends up doing almost 10 years in Alcatraz, right? He gets sick. He has syphilis. And believe it or not, he ends up coming back to Miami in that same home and dies in 1947. So people don't realize Capone lived there and he died there. One of the most infamous gangsters in U.S. history died in Miami. And Miami has
an interesting footnote. Everybody knows they call him Scarface.
Scarface.
Very rarely, he was very camera conscious. He would very rarely put that side of his face to the camera. But I saw an image of it the other day with a very detailed explanation. They said that, when he was about 19 years old, he was in Coney Island in Brooklyn, which is like a mile from where I grew up in Brooklyn. And he was at a club there, and he said something about a woman's rear end, and the brother came to her, to defend her honor and cut him up three times. There's 3 long slices on the side of his face.
Yes.
And I know I've been to Rikers Island, and those guys spit out razor blades and whack people in the face with them, for any reason, for being on the phone too long, this was crazy. But I've seen those type of scars, and he's got horrendous marks. Interestingly, years later, I think it was Frankie Vale had sat them down and insisted that Capone don't kill this guy. And exchange, the guy had to pay Capone a settlement of $1,700. And years later in Chicago, the same guy who cut him up, I think his name was Colucci, was hired to be one of the bodyguards. He kept him close as a bodyguard.
A lot of people, it's hard to, when you do something like that, to work things out. Sometimes, especially a guy like Capone, who takes no prisoners, right?
Yep. Tell me some more about the history of organized crime in Miami. What do we have?
Yeah. So that's a little portion about Capone there. So and he was really entrenched in South Florida, even though he went to Alcatraz and everything else. And then you look at an interesting. This happens a few years later. Frank Nitti, Capone's now is incarcerated in Alcatraz. Nitti now is running the outfit, and the mayor at the time, Anton Cermak. There's a big push now to take these guys out because they're tired of organized crime, and he has his own political ambitions, and I think he wants to rise, maybe even to run for president, right? Cermak does there, and you're looking now in the late 30s. Capone's out of the picture, and he has Chicago police allegedly, according to reports, they do a warrant at the office where Nitty's at, and they pretty much open up on him, trying to kill him right there. Allegedly in the reports, they said that he had a weapon, he tried to shoot at him. Well, later in the investigation showed that never happened. And these officers were later fired for their job for doing that. Right. But the word came out that Cermak wanted him dead. All right, so now we fast forward. FDR, Hoover, I'm going to give a little politics here. Herbert Hoover, who was a president who started this task force, the Untouchables, he didn't have a good grip on the Depression. They said he was a little cold. He didn't give people the work they needed. Even Al Capone gave his own money for the soup kitchens out there in Chicago, if you remember all that. Al Capone was even he was like an Escobar too, right? He would help the ultra poor with all the extra money he had. And Herbert Hoover seemed a president that was not in touch with the needs of the average working person that was suffering during the Depression. So FDR wins in a landslide. That's Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and he'll end up being president for. He'll be elected 4 times, but he'll die in office. A little history because my background is also I have a lot of history in international relations. Bill. So now we're looking in Miami, 1933. FDR beats Hoover in a landslide in 32. But then it takes a lot. Now the president gets elected in January. Then it was still he didn't get elected. I'm sorry. He would get sworn in January. Now he doesn't get sworn in until almost middle of March back then. So he's president-elect. It's February. FDR had taken a trip to the day trip to the Bahamas, I think Bimini, do some fishing. He was going to do a quick 1-minute speech, right, to the people there in South Florida in Bayfront Park. I think you know where Bayfront Park is. There's a memorial now there of the mayor who passed away, who was assassinated. So you have this guy, he's an Italian immigrant, Giuseppe Zangara, very short guy, 5 feet, right? If you can see his picture, just type in his name in there. And he has a .32 caliber Ivory Johnson. It's a revolver. Right. And he gets on the chair. It's a wobbly chair. And he's trying to shoot and kill the president. But people start hearing the shots fired. They start grabbing his hand and shooting it. So the rounds start spraying. And he ends up shooting the mayor. The mayor gets hit instead. FDR does not. Allegedly, while FDR is holding him while they're going to the hospital, the mayor says, "Mr. President, I'm glad it was me and not you." right? That would be one of his famous last words. The mayor would say he would pass away a few days later from his wounds. They got complicated. Yeah,
I didn't realize the mayor had died from that day.
the mayor was assassinated by him, by this guy Zangara.
He was the guy that was turned out he was an anarchist of some kind.
He was crazy. He had mental health issues.
Right.
He had all those things that factor into a lot of these guys that have. He was a very short guy. I think Sicilian, Italian, and his remarks. Well, I'll tell you what happened with FDR. So he said that, and a lot of people suspected. Said, "Wow, that was kind of strange." Maybe, and this is speculations out there, that he was hired by the outfit to get back at Nitti, to get back at him for trying to kill Nitti during that raid, right? So a lot of people thought maybe FDR wasn't the intended target, but maybe it was the mayor of Chicago after all. Very dirty, that's speculation out there. I don't know. I think it was what happened was he had his arm hit, his forearm, and his round started spraying, and he just happened to be by chance the mayor gets killed there. But that's what's out there, and that happened in Miami, and a lot of people think it ties. Now Zangara would be executed pretty quickly. He was convicted. Look how quickly this happened. This happened in February, and then in March, he only spent 10 days on death row in Rayford, and then he was executed by Old Sparky. 10 days. You know how it takes years to do things to execute? We had one guy we talked about.
20 years, 27 years.
40 years, right? This guy was executed within 10 days after being convicted. Different times, right, Bill?
Yeah.
Different times. They took care of him really quick. His last words, very interesting, was Viva Italia, just like that. Viva Italia. And it says, I dare you do it. Push the button already. Push the button already. And they did.
Well, listen, I just want to tell you something that's coming in for our audience. I'm listening to you, but I'm following this also. Have you seen this?
I see him. What's he saying?
There's a coup underway in Russia, as we discussed earlier.
Yes.
For my audience, we're putting out a series of specials on this progress.
Yes.
This is the head of the Wagner Group.
Right.
In the process of overthrowing Vladimir Putin.
The mercenaries.
Stay tuned. We're going to update you. This may be old by the time you see this, but he's giving a press conference now.
Absolutely. And rightfully so. They've had it. And I know we're talking about the mafia and the history there, but this is fascinating also. And we did a little update on that also. So watch that for sure. Interesting
stuff. Give me some more on the mafia and Miami, and then we'll see what's going to happen when they throw Putin out of power or take care of
business. My goodness. Yes. So, the mafia in South Florida, there's so much history. Even though it was an open area, it seems like a lot of people operating in South Florida one way and the other. You had the bootlegging, you had the gambling, you had professional sports, you had horse racing and boxing. Very corrupt also. Mafia behind that too. A lot of it. A lot of these guys tied into different crime families would be convicted for the operations in South Florida. Big time. This guy, Frankie Garbo, notoriously involved. And he was called the commissioner of boxing for a reason, because of his connection with the mafia. And even Bobby Kennedy had a big case on him, and co-conspirators had him convicted, right, for federal racketeering, illegal gambling. And he also went to Alcatraz. Mm-hmm. Frank Garbo. So one of the most famous fights, and if those who, I don't know how much boxing you find, but this was an historical boxing bout that happened in Miami Beach, 1964. You have Sonny Liston, the heavyweight champion, right? Who he's like the Mike Tyson of his time. He crushed everyone. He crushed Patterson, 2 first-round bouts, heavyweight champ, right? Sonny Liston was a beast, was a bear. Cassius Clay, 22 years old, right? Who would later become Muhammad Ali, an up-and-comer. Already lost the fights and struggled. No one gave, I'm going to call him Clay because at the time he was Cassius Clay, gave Clay the chance to win the fight. He was an enormous underdog. But for some reason, a lot of people think this one, and definitely the second one, that Sonny Liston, such a heavy favorite, that they threw the fight for a reason, for the Mafia to make a lot of money.
Right.
Because a very unusual fight. If you look at the fight in the 8th round, he doesn't even get up. This guy stormed past everybody. Ali, a lot slender. There was no reason why Sonny Liston should not have crushed Ali. A lot of people don't like that.
It's funny, just as another aside here, I introduced you to Laura Leone. She worked for the Justice Department out in California. And she was a financial crimes investigator, but when you guys or the FBI, whoever would take down somebody, she was the one who tracked down the assets and made sure they got paid. So I know you've done an interview with her now. Listen, she's she's incredible. Her and her husband are huge boxing fans.
Oh,
She knows that even to this day, there's like all kinds of
corruption.
impropriety going on with boxing.
There is. There is. And Miami was in the center of it in 1964, Miami Beach Convention Center. It's
Right.
if you haven't seen all that fight, I'll watch the fight again because it's all out there on YouTube and other platforms. You can watch it again. I watched it again. But the one that I really thought there was something wrong was the rematch. They fight about a year later, and in all places, they don't do it back in Miami. They go to Maine in an unusual venue. I think it was in Lewiston. The town is in my book. And if you haven't seen, this is the famous Phantom Punch. First round, Ali takes down Sonny Liston in the first round, and you don't even think he gets hit. He has the famous like this. And you say, did he even go down? And Ali's overheard saying, "Suck." You know how you say, "Sucker, sucker." You got to get up. No one's going to believe you went down on that punch.
Wow, he's caught on camera.
He's overheard, and eventually he celebrates. But everybody thinks
it's available on YouTube or somewhere.
You can see it anywhere. Yeah, you go on YouTube and watch that. Everybody, that's the famous Phantom Punch where I really thought that one he threw. That becomes the rise of Ali. His life changes. He's the heavyweight champion. And Sonny Liston's career, his character goes, and he was a champion one time. And that to me was his ties to the mafia and everything else and his financial issues. I have to think that was really bad that he went down. That he just pretty much, maybe he wasn't told to do it, or maybe he did himself. I don't know. I don't have that information. But you look for yourself. That does not look good at all.
Right. So now we're talking about the mafia and the history of the mafia in Miami, of all places. Now we both have ties to Miami.
Yes.
Now let's talk about, you have a Cuban heritage, so you're well plugged in. Bay of Pigs, all this stuff. What in the world are the ties with the mafia in Miami with the Cuban attempted invasion of Cuba?
Yeah, no, I have a few books on this. I have Castro and the Mob. I have this one, Miami's history with the mafia. And it's fascinating because obviously with my family also, and it's fascinating how angry the mafia was. You got the Mayorlanskis, some Traficantes. They were really rich. They had the Havana Riviera. They had some of the biggest hotels, casinos in Havana. And Havana was, if you don't know, at the time in the 50s, it was like the Monte Carlo of the Americas.
That's right. Exactly.
Everybody went. The most Frank Sinatra was performing there over time. Yet the biggest performers went to there. They wasn't going to Las Vegas. It was Havana, right? Everybody wanted to go Havana and spend a weekend, a cruise ship. Everything was within Cuba. And these guys were angry. They lost everything. Mayorlansky, everything. And he would die in Miami Beach also, by the way. That's another gangster that ends up dying his days out there. And he struggles a lot in South Florida. A lot of these guys are. And by the way, Frank Carbo, he was convicted, right? He came to Alcatraz. You know where he ends up dying? He also dies in Miami.
Okay.
All these gangsters end up coming back to South Florida, and that's their last home. I guess maybe it's the weather or something. I don't know.
I know even Boca Raton in Fort Lauderdale has a lot of mobsters.
A lot.
There are a lot of Gambinos, especially.
Yes, it's all over South Florida how these guys operate, and a lot of them just want to retire there, retired mafiosos, right? They want to come down there, which is fascinating. You can, my book has a lot of details and people and locations and restaurants that were owned. So that restaurant was owned by these people. This restaurant was owned here. I used to, so you start looking at all different spots where you're looking. And I have a lot listed in the book there. So you like this kind of information, you can find some more stuff that's in there.
How about the famous restaurant Versailles, where Trump was over there and said dinner, food for everybody the other day, but also it's been around forever. It was featured in Scarface, the famous shootout.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Al Pacino. What's
Ronald Reagan spoke there too.
Connections with that in real life? I'm sure there is.
But Ronald Reagan also had a famous speech there in Versailles. Yeah, I remember when I was growing up watching it. Ronald Reagan spoke there. That's I think why Trump decided to speak there. But I heard he said it's all on him, but he forgot to pay the tip, pay the bill.
What he said was, I actually saw it live. He said, "Food for everybody." He didn't say it was on him. So if you want to split hairs, he made it seem like it was going to be on him.
Yeah. I think as much money as he has, he should still send him something to the restaurant, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
If I was him, I'll be like, hey, no, my bad. If I didn't pay right there, but I will pay whatever the costs were and make sure you reimburse the patrons there.
Make sure there's publicity about it, because the mainstream media will just keep the story that he never paid the bill.
So one of the most famous mobsters to ever his body be recovered in Miami was Johnny Rosselli. Hollywood Johnny, right? We're looking at now summer of '76, and a bunch of fishermen recover a 55-gallon steel drum. And when authorities opened it up, it was his body who was asphyxiated. Obviously.
Where was it found? In the Everglades?
No, it was a bay in Miami.
Okay.
It's in my book, and it's near North Miami Beach, and it was found there. So all of a sudden, that opened up a lot of what happened, because Rosselli, a year earlier, remember, the mafia, especially the outfit, doesn't like when you people talk about mafia operations, right? And he, in front of the Senate committee, the church Senate committee in '75, testifies about CIA mafia collusion, and he talks about it all. If you want to see that, he puts it all out there, right? Trafficante would later do the same thing in a congressional hearing a few years later. He would deny any, because he was being accused of part of the JFK assassination. He said it had nothing to do with that. But yeah, we did help with anti-Castro activities.
You know what I find interesting? I think it was Sam Giancana. They called him Moon, out of Chicago.
Yes.
He was living peacefully in retirement in the '70s. That same hearing, I think for that same exact hearing, he was being called to testify.
A week after, Rosselli testifies first, and then Giancana is called in to testify.
But he was killed
2 days before, in his basement. A gunman comes in and assassinates him, shoots him 7 times while he's cooking sausages and peppers in his basement.
Exactly. I remember that. I couldn't believe it. I've read a book his brother wrote.
Yes, it's in my book too. Look it up. Also, Chicago crime bosses. I didn't look good for Giancana. But
what about this case, Dania Highlight? Highlight is that game with the net, and they throw a ball real fast. And I remember there was somebody, I think the owner of Dania Highlight was killed. That this had to do with Sonny Whitey Bulger and a FBI agent giving up the locations of some of the informants or something like that. And they were going to Florida killing witnesses.
No, it's crazy, because I'm going back to this story here. You have CIA, Robert Maheu, which is a retired FBI agent, which is the private investigator for Howard Hughes, the only private investigator for Howard Hughes, working for the CIA, talking to Rosselli, proposing that we need to kill Fidel Castro. But he doesn't say he's working for the CIA. He says he's working for these international business groups that lost a lot of money that want Castro dead. It won't be until later they figure out they're working for the CIA indirectly, right? So he introduces them, said, listen, this is not my thing, but I'm going to introduce a guy, Trafficante Jr. out of Tampa, and Sam Giancana out of the outfit.
Yeah.
And they all meet in Miami, and this is where they start plotting how to poison Fidel Castro, how to kill Castro. And after failed attempts, it's all detailed in my book, then they try the Bay of Pigs, and that's a fiasco. And that doesn't work. Without the promised air support, you had the Cuban exiles who are training Guatemala. They're coming in to invade in that area. Kennedy promised the air support and didn't give it to them, and it was a disaster. And that's what happened. Castro wins, and then they make that ridiculous deal with the Cuban Missile Crisis, where they promised never to invade Cuba if they take the missiles out of Cuba, and we won't invade, and they won't invade Turkey.
What excuse did Kennedy ever give for withdrawing the assurance of air support for the invasion?
He just my understanding was he just didn't feel comfortable with it. But you promised that. After
everybody's lives and the mission's already underway, he just says no, and
no, doesn't do it.
How could it possibly be? You know,
the fail not having the air support that was promised, that was needed. That pretty much, I mean, you're sitting ducks out there, and a lot of these guys were killed or taken prisoners, and then they have a huge negotiation to get them out, and then he goes to the Orange Bowl in Miami and presents those guys with awards, but then said, you didn't do what you're supposed to do. I've never been a fan of the Kennedys, and now you have RFK Jr. Going after Biden there. I mean, I do like that he's challenging him on health issues, especially stuff, but I think he's absolutely wrong about the war in Ukraine.
Do you think the failure of air support and then Bobby Kennedy going after the mob when they probably shouldn't have or weren't supposed to was the impetus for the assassination of Kennedy? Do you think the mob pulled that off and helped with the CIA to set that up and really make Oswald look like a patsy, although, he was certainly probably maybe involved, but he was certainly in the wrong place at the wrong time. And the first thing he said is, "Hey, I am a patsy." He said that very sincerely. He said, "I'm a patsy," and then they quickly killed him.
And then I'm not a conspiracy theorist there. I believe in criminal conspiracies, but RFK Jr. does, and he goes in detail why he thinks it does. And then Jack Ruby kills Oswald, right? And famous. If you haven't seen that video, you'll look that one online, and you see Oswald's face when he gets shot. And Jack Ruby, they said had mafia ties.
He was he was so close with that police department and all the journalists
Yes.
because he owned strip clubs and he was mobbed up that he walked right into the holding area of the sheriff's
Sure
office
did.
before they loaded him into a car and shot him right in the stomach on camera on live television.
On live television. If you haven't seen that video, check that out. Go YouTube. You can check that out. I've seen so many videos in that, and I write about that. It's
What's
intriguing.
interesting, Ignacio, I track a lot of what other true crime guys do just to get an idea because everybody knows I'm out of prison a year. I'm
Sure.
learning this and I'm really into it. I'm very passionate about this.
Yeah, me too.
I want to learn what people do that works and what I can put my own spin on things, my own personality. And one of the things like Atwood, Sean Atwood in London, shout out to Sean. You know, we'd like to get Ignacio on the show. I'd like to be on again.
Yeah, I'd love to be on the show for sure.
Both times my shows went viral, 300,000 views. What he does polls of his fans. He's got like 1 million fans, right? Subscribers. And he'll ask them, what topics do you want me to cover? Most popular. Every single time, JFK conspiracy theories are number one fans want to hear. And he's a true crime channel. Right. That's the number one. I think UFOs comes in second. But that's a huge topic. One day we got to circle back and do some shows on that.
Yeah, we do a little deeper dig on. Maybe I will do a little book or do like something else.
Let's have an expert with us too. A couple of experts or people from that era to come on with us.
Oswald was what I remember. Where I saw documentaries where I read about. He was a communist, right? Mm-hmm. He was in the Soviet Union. His wife was Russian that he brought over, right? He was trying to get in the Cuban embassy in Mexico City.
Right.
He was protesting in New Orleans, hardcore communist. You know, the biggest mistake, I think the biggest failure and everything I've read and seen, watching the Zapruder film, is that how could the Secret Service, knowing how close calls they've had, especially with FDR. Remember I just talked about a presidential assassination, right? Open car. Don't people learn? Secret Service was already, don't you learn from history how close Zangara was to killing FDR? Right, this close, right? Yeah. Look what happens later. How do they not have him in a closed top? How could they have him in buildings? It to me, and again, in law enforcement, that those were mistakes made. We've had number of presidents killed already. This is not the first one. You know, from Lincoln to Garfield to McKinley. I mean, we've had errors like this committed.
One of them was shot at the train station. He died.
Garfield.
Yes, he died because he got sepsis because the doctors kept putting their unprotected hands in there looking for the bullet.
Yeah, that was the argument used by the anarchists to kill them. I want to say he was Polish immigrant, but his argument was it wasn't my bullet that killed him. It was the ineptitude of the doctors, but he still was convicted and he was done.
Right, he started the chain of events that led to that.
Yeah, exactly.
Have you ever, you being in federal law enforcement, have you ever assisted with a presidential protection detail with the Secret Service?
I've done a lot of details in the United Nations, UNGA, United Nations General Assembly. I've helped protect those from other nations, from the Saudis to Vietnam, different countries, right? Even Palestinians, right? But you have to be smart, right? I just thought, just looking at that perspective there, why is the top down a convertible? Why is he better protected? That to me, especially how close FDR was, you have to learn from history. You have to learn from history. If not, you repeat that same mistake. I think they learned a lot from Ronald Reagan almost getting killed by Hinckley, right? Very, very close again. Too many people too close to him. You just can't have that. You can't do that.
I was looking at old clips from funny thing is black and white clips from candid cameras just last night. And one of them, they knew that Harry Truman took a walk in Manhattan at a certain time of day every day with like an assistant and maybe one guard, right? And they kept using him in the prank. They had a lady with the show asking a stranger for directions. And then she'd look up and say, "Oh, hello, Mr. President." And then the guy, the victim of the prank, would never even notice it was the president. And then one day the president turned to the camera. He says, "I know you're working with the people in that van with the hidden cameras."
Oh, wow. I want to check.
Just walking down the sidewalk.
Wow. I want to take a look at that. That's in candid camera?
I'm not sure if he was still in office or right after he left office.
He probably been out of office because he was out in 52. That's when Eisenhower took over. So I would say, see, folks, I'm also, before I got into law enforcement, my background was in political science and history and international relations. So this is a passion of mine too, and I love all this stuff. I love American history, but I also fascinated with world history also. And Bill and I can see
more
that.
Miami,
more Miami stuff. So
love the Mafia history.
yeah, and we got the Mafia, we got the history there. So it's a fascinating, interesting book. How close they were colluding. So you had the mafia and the CIA with a former FBI agent colluding how to kill Fidel Castro. They lost a lot. We as a country lost a lot, right? American companies got raped. He nationalized. He took everything from himself. Fidel Castro, in essence, became the ultimate mob boss. Is what he became, right? And he took over the country. He's a dictator, and he ran. And, you know, as someplace better the devil you know than the devil you don't know, because people said, "Oh, Fulgencio Batista, he was corrupt and dirty," but he wasn't a dictator like this. He just liked to get paid.
And the way he got in, I think, from the little bit of history I know, and it's not much, I know he's roundly despised, was, you know, by saying, well, the Americans are coming here exploiting the people and turning
Yes.
them into prostitutes and all this stuff.
He was very anti-imperialist, very anti-capitalist.
Yeah,
Very much. He had hardcore communists. Che Guevara was a hardcore communist.
I did time, you know, in New York years ago, and I wrote, I think it was the Cuban consulate or something, because I'm not sure if there's even an embassy, but at the time, and I'm always curious about things. And there was no internet back then. Yeah. And I said, hey, I'm interested in possibly doing business with your country or traveling or buying a house there, but I know there's restrictions in place. Can you clarify me from the Cuban point of view, you know, why this is going on and how come all this property was seized and stuff? You know, they sent me back a very nice letter.
Did they really?
They said, look, you know, they went over all the propaganda, but then they said, as for the property that was taken back, you know, by the people or whatever they call themselves, you know, the reason we did that, and explain the reasons why. And over the years, we have offered to pay people who have lost their homes in casinos and hotels and who fled the country during this period. But we're a very poor country, and the only thing we offered to pay them with was this comparable value in sugar. And the United States government is refusing to allow them to accept sugar as payment.
Yeah, we can't.
That's what they said. I'm telling you in a letter from the consulate.
Yeah, you can keep your sugar and stuff that, you know, where no, you stole things. You're a thief. They're thieves. They're imagine that, do it here, and they're trying to, you know, a lot of people think you know, the Biden administration and everything else. It's just, you get higher taxes, overburden, right? It's the same. It's the same principle. It's the same principle.
What's your read like? Okay, so check out Ignacio's book on this topic. It's in the link.
The history of the mafia in Miami, also Castro and the mafia and Chicago crime bosses. All these mafiosos. I talk about the history, the tie to Florida, but all over the country and the world. Because, you know, it's Miami. I guess all roads go through Damascus. Well, all roads through organized crime go through South Florida.
Fugitives end up there. I was a fugitive, ended up in South Florida. We all flee to warmer climates. I went to South Florida, Las Vegas, Southern California when I was on the run. Question for you. You just left federal law enforcement, what, a year ago? How long ago now?
It's almost 2 years now.
Okay. So this man's fresh out of the Department of Justice and the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives. From your perspective, from your insights, from your knowledge, who is active, really active, and to be looked out for now in South Florida, whether it's Italian organized crime, street gangs? Are you allowed to name names, leadership, anything you might be aware of?
Yeah, it's not the mafia anymore. Mafia's done. And I've talked about other books. It's the fall of the mafia and the rise of the Mexican cartels. The Mexican cartels are extremely powerful, and they work a lot with street gangs. So who you should fear? The violent street gangs. And if you're in Florida, they're all over, between, you know, Bloods, Crips, MS-13, Mala Salvatrucha. Very, very powerful, very violent group. Other Hispanic groups, the Mexican Mafia out there in Southern California, and they spread around, and they have ties with the cartels. I think we keep on hitting them hard, and they keep on flourishing, getting bigger and stronger. I think we've talked about in other shows that the organized crime, they are it. The Italian Mafia, their days are done. What happened to them? Racketeering cases. Federal racketeering cases destroyed them, decimated them, right? They turn on each other. They're doing some serious time. No one wants to do 30 years, right? Right? Just like the bikers.
They're all turning into CIs. You guys lock somebody up, you know exactly how to flip them. You know their pressure points.
Nobody wants to do 30 years. You got a good case. You got them locked up. They're going to, and you just keep on taking more down and more down and more down. And again, a lot of them have gone legitimate too. A lot of them didn't want their kids involved in this lifestyle. Right? They themselves became lawyers and doctors, and they have legitimate businesses, and the mafia phased out. The bikers, they're getting crushed also. You know, the one percenters, the Hells Angels, right? The outlaws, the Mongols, the Bandidos, the Vagos, just to name a few.
Was it the outlaws or the pagans years ago that like drove a gigantic thing around the jail downtown in Fort Lauderdale, and they had a big funeral.
It would be the Outlaws if it was Fort Lauderdale.
I remember it was like late '80s, I believe.
Yeah, if it was Fort Lauderdale, it would have been the Outlaws. But now Florida, I talk about in my book, is the Outlaws are losing control. It used to be an open state. Then the Outlaws, Taco Bowman, had more control. But now it seems like the Mongols and the pagans have maybe joined forces to try to fight the Outlaws. Right. And Florida might be an open state again soon. We'll see. A lot of people like to retire from different, which I saw and I noticed when I was in ATF in Florida, in Central Florida, from if they're retired Hell's Angel, pagan, what have you. They like Florida. Well,
do their traditional clubhouses still exist for these 1% gangs? Like, you see the movies from the 60s or 70s, they have a clubhouse, and everybody knows it. It's been there forever. In South Florida, they're formal clubhouses. Is that fly?
All over Florida, yeah. They have clubhouses. So they have them all over. But like I said, they're getting weaker because, like I said, racketeering cases have been decimating them also. But it's hard for somebody with the street gangs. They're like when you stomp on them, they keep on spreading more. So it's you have to hit the culture early. You got to get these kids out of that lifestyle early. You have to, because once they're indoctrinated, they're like these killers. They're indoctrinating killers at an early age. They're desensitized, and they're okay with the lifestyle murdering. They know that, hey, my life expectancy is going to be my 20s, and I'm going out like a gangster. And they're okay living like that.
For my audience, we are trying to reach people that, to not just educate, but even reach, like you said, the younger generation to say, hey, don't follow in my footsteps. I served a hell of a lot of time in prison for nonviolent crime, over 18 years. I was a law clerk. So everybody comes to law clerks eventually for help. Hey, can you help me file a grievance, or I'm trying to get back to court, or this or that. And I noticed one thing, and I will put this out there without naming names. A lot of times it's the leadership of these gangs that have made deals with law enforcement, yet they're still actively doing stuff. Probably the agents controlling them or working with them on a different case are not aware they're still active, hopefully. But they're still having these underlings commit all these serious crimes, murders, beating up people, extorting people, and they'll get 20 or 30 years for all that and more. And these top guys are the ones working with the investigators all along, and they'll get a deal for 5 years. They're the ones that come out with the deal. So be careful who recruits you, because they're not your friend. They're trying to recruit you to do illegal shit. Excuse my language. They're not your friend. Get out of it. Change your ways. Go to a church. Look up somebody that you can talk to. There's so many people in recovery and churches that have been through the gang lifestyle that'll help you. They'll talk to you. You don't need to look for a father figure and a gang leader. You don't need to do that. You just don't. There's plenty of other mentors and good people who are not going to run to the police and tell them your business. If you just go to a church or somewhere for help and say, hey, I'm getting drafted into this gang, or I just got in, I don't know how to get back out. People will help you without getting you in trouble or killed. The people will help you. There's a lot of people that got out of that and are helping others. And I encourage you not to follow them. I wasn't a gang member, but don't follow my footsteps, breaking the law and thinking it's okay, and F the police and all that stuff.
I've been watching since I retired a lot of these shows like you, Bill, and watching these guys who are former gangsters or mob hitmen, right? Not to mention any names, but I've watched them all. And I even went on some of these shows and asked them questions, right? And sometimes they're live and you can ask questions and what have you. Well, any regrets, or what have you learned from, you kill like 15 people, right? You cooperate with the government or what have you. And a lot of them wish they would have learned earlier that they didn't have to do that to gain respect or make money, right? There's other ways, legitimate ways to gain respect from people and make money. That's what they want. They want respect. They want people to respect them. But that was the one way to get respect.
In the end, Ignacio, and I try to ask all my guests this lately, I try to add this into my shows lately. In the end, you did the criminal thing. Now you changed. You supposedly changed. You're writing books. You're making movies. In the end, how do you want to be remembered to your community and your family if the Lord was to take you home today? How do you want to be remembered? I'll ask that.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that.
Do you want to be known as somebody who went out and killed somebody for your friend over, a couple of $100 drug money or a couple of $1,000? Or do you want to be somebody who was good and put your kids through college and you had a stable life for them?
That's what I'm hoping to remember for.
You protected your daughters from all the bad people out there.
Yeah, family first. Work hard. There's nothing more. No one ever says, I wish I spent more time at work at the end of their lives, right? They always say, I wish I spent more time with my family. Spend time, those who are family members, spend time, help your family, because that's your legacy that continues. When you pass away, that's your legacy. That's part of you. they continue, and they're going to continue. So try and make their lives as comfortable as possible so they can take care of their children. So that future generations, that's why I work hard. So future generations can be taken care of. That's the most important thing.
Let's wrap this show up. Thank you for joining myself and Ignacio, retired agent Ignacio Esteban. His books are in the description. Hit the links, my books, our Patreons.
Patreon sites. Check them out.
Mine's still a work in progress because I'm so new with this. I don't know what the heck I'm doing, but I'm trying to figure it out.
Yeah, we all are.
Ignacio, thank you for your insights, man. You're an incredible guest, and I've become a friend, and I appreciate your time.
Yeah,
thank you for agreeing. So we're going to be putting these shows out, these particular episodes, every Thursday.
Co-host. I'm the co-host here.
That's right. We're going to be doing it at 8:00. Either putting them up recorded or live, but they're going to be going up consistently, so you can tune in to get real, incredible insight from a former law enforcement guy and a former reformed crook, basically. So,
and occasionally we'll throw a quick little short episode on current events too.
Yeah, I'd like to follow up on this. Unfolding right now,
Russia.
Hopefully Putin will be out of power here or something worse in the next shortly.
I think so.
Thank you again for joining, everybody. Please
like
and subscribe. Check out our links to grow this channel. I ask you to please share it with people. Tell people about it. If you like what I'm doing, I spent many, many years breaking the law, and I'm trying to do the right thing here, and I feel I am. I'm getting a lot of good input. Inmate to roommate, I'm not allowed to talk about season 2. Stay tuned. It's got big numbers. Stay tuned. They're not stupid. They know what they're doing. I'm not allowed to talk about it. Everybody.
All right, guys.
Take care. Take care, Ignacio.
Bye.